Hello, you're listening to CKMS 102.7 FM Waterloo Radio, and that was Wake Up and Rise by Dig-In Roots. We are here with Two White Feather, Lori Gentle Eagle, and you cannot forget the mascot Cedar is on the Red Road journey where we amplify indigenous voices, to heal ourselves, our relatives, our communities, and our planet. We're broadcasting you from the traditional territories of the neutral Anishinaabe and Haudenosaunee people. Hook ya! So Friday, November 8th, marked Indigenous Veterans Day. And I got to pull up the word to figure out how to say it. Thank you. We are pausing the Red Road journey today to recognize and ceremony those Indigenous men and women who served because colonization did not allow for this demonstration of respect. Some, even today, question whether it is Indigenous persons' battle to fight. Now we're going to play a little audio video here, so let me pull it up. So
war. A war that reached into our homes and families. Our young men and women enlisted in the thousands. Some asked if it was our battle to fight. I felt guilty for a long time for having served in the armed forces when many of our others resisted. Until one of my elders revealed at a meeting not too long ago, said that the first time that our people...
So that was it. No?
Said war. A war that reached into our homes and families. Our young men and women enlisted in the thousands. Some asked if it was our battle to fight. I felt guilty for a long time for having served in the armed forces when many of our others resisted. Until one of my elders revealed at a meeting not too long ago, said that the first time that our people...
Like, what's going on here?
Okay, we'll play it another way here. Sorry about that.
Said war. A war that reached into our homes and families. Our young men and women enlisted in the thousands. Some asked if it was our battle to fight. I felt guilty for a long time for having served in the armed forces when many of our others resisted. Until one of my elders revealed at a meeting not too long ago, said that the first time that our people complained about having to serve in the armed forces, the government told them, well, you have an agreement with the Queen, and the Queen, she needs help today, because if she's defeated, your agreements goes down with it. So they went. As sovereign states, Aboriginal nations declared themselves allies to the British Crown from the Plains of Abraham to the War of 1812. The Aboriginal people don't go to war for imperialist notions. They're not out there to go out and say, hey, we've only got this much territory, let's go out and gain more territory. See? They'll go out for, defense. See? It was not to gain more land. For Aboriginal people, the whole view about land is really about relationships to the land. Their philosophy is that everything in the world is animate, and because it's all animate, everything in the universe is all interrelated. So when they're being brought into these skirmishes, into these battles, what's really at the back of the Indians' mind is somehow trying to maintain relationships with the land so as to bring about harmony and balance. Our young soldiers saw service away from this land. They served with General Gordon in Egypt and in the Boer War. When the First World War was declared, Indian, Métis, and our Inuit brothers enlisted as volunteers. Joe Daniels volunteered, so did Private Martin and Private Buck. Corporal Francis Pegamagabo, the most decorated Indian soldier of the First World War. Olympic athlete Tom Longboat, and Private Norwest, who never came home.
We see the fight is to maintain an harmonious relationship with the land, and to enlist would be viewed as a reclaiming warrior heritage, not unlike our land defenders, water protectors of today.
Indigenous people served more than any other ethnic group. It is estimated that there are 23,000 Indigenous veterans, with 12,000 participating in World War I, World War II, and Korea. The most decorated Indigenous soldier in Canada is Francis Pegamagabo. Apologize for the pronunciation there. Henri Louis Norwest was a Métis sniper, and Private George Monroe was awarded a Medal for Bravery. Mary Grey Eyes was the first Native woman to enlist. And we can't forget about Sergeant Tommy Prince, who, although rejected many times due to discrimination, went on to be the founding member of the elite 1st Canadian Parachute Battalion and the 1st Special Service Force during World War II.
There were sacrifices and shameful outcomes. Sadly, Tom and Prince eventually died in the streets of Winnipeg. We're going to play a clip from Forgotten Warriors, a film of the National Film Board of Canada by Loretta Todd. This is water-based brass speaking.
Inside of a year, I got a fully furnished house, and I'm married. Now my wife's a little baby, only 3 months old. And that came the biggest shock of my life. And one day, this knock at the door, and this young man, a very well-dressed man, very authority voice on him. He knew who I was. He knew where I came from. And I thought to myself, he's probably from Indian Affairs. He's come to shake my hand and give me a pat in the back for doing so good for myself. And he said, "You're Walter Brad?" I said, "Yes, I am." He said, "Do you know that you have this, you own your house?" "Yes, my house. I paid cash for it." "Do you know that you violated the law?" "What law?" He says, "A treaty Indian says can't own any property." Then I was a little bit annoyed because it's only 2 years since I got my discharge. So I said, "You mean to tell me that fighting for the war for this country, that I can't have no right to own property. He said, no, you have no right. A couple of months later, I got this card. I was showing you about this enfranchisement. So I'm not an Indian anymore. I'm an enfranchised, but I don't know what to call myself, you know. It says on there now I can vote. And I enjoy all the privileges of His Majesty's subjects, you see. So I just, in other words, I guess I made myself a first-class citizen by doing that. But I've lost my rights as an Indian, see.
I don't have to be called a hero every day, but I want equal terms as anybody else. But I can't seem to get it.
There were Nixon's.
Indigenous veterans lost their status, their land, and much more. We're going to play another audio.
Irony of Aboriginal soldiers fighting a war against the oppression of fascism, giving their lives for that, and coming home to face oppressive fascism.
When I come back from overseas, they wouldn't allow us to go curling. They wouldn't allow us to go golfing in this town where I was. And when you went to the show, the Indians used to have to sit on one side of the picture show, you know. I came to have a terrific inferiority complex. I couldn't look anybody in the eye. I had my head down all the time. And I just as soon, if I did look up, I just as soon hit you person than look at them. And that's the rage in me at that time.
I used to break out in sweats. I'd be yelling. My dad finally put me in the caboose to sleep because I wake up my brothers and sisters and that. So I used to sleep out there. And the only way I could forget that is get myself stoned, really drunk. And then I'd sleep till whenever the sun up. But I used to, under the bed, I used to look and there'd be a bottle that I'd do it all over again. And I think as a result of war, a lot of the former guys that were in the war got into that,
Took Canada 50 years to allow Indigenous veterans to lay a wreath at a memorial in Ottawa on Remembrance Day. The first Indigenous Veterans Day was held in 1994 in Winnipeg. Here we have some who are remembering in a good way. Quebec resident and amateur historian Yane Castleknott compiled one of the largest databases of Indigenous soldiers and their contributions to the Canadian and U.S. forces. As well, the lost funds provided funeral, burial, grave marking benefits to the Canadian veterans. It will add a person's traditional name to a military marker or provide a new military marker if there wasn't one. So, we're going to play a couple songs. The first song is called Soldier Boy by Black Lodge Singers. So, here it is. All right. Soldier Boy.
Soldier
Oh, yeah. So that was Soldier Boy. So our next song is I'll play Super Drum for now.
Make a get anyone's attention up here right now. We're about to let you know what that army song was for. So please remain standing if you can.
Okay, so that was the honor song of the Mi'kmaq by Super Drum Group. Our next one is Lakota Nation Anthem, the flag song, plus the veteran song by the Porcupine Singers. So here it is. Sorry. It was already in midway playing for some reason.
Connected with a friend whom we met on the crafting vendor circuit. He is many things, but for the purposes of today, I'll let you know of a few of the things that he is involved with. He's the owner of Kinnick Trading Company down in Niagara region. He is a supporter of Indigenous veterans and a volunteer with Pirates of the New World, who do all they can to make things better for the citizens of New Orleans. In fact, we interviewed him while he is down in Louisiana right now. And we spoke to him about his current project involving the Shanesha-Tene, which is an Apache tribe in Louisiana, and all the work that is being done, of which he's assisting with to reclaim their heritage. So we're going to play the interview, and this is our interview down from Edd, who's in Louisiana.
Yeah. All right. Welcome to the Red Road Show, Edd. Can you introduce yourself and your connections to veterans, and why is it so important to you?
Thank you. Nice to be here. My name is Edd Scorpio. I was born on Remembrance Day, so I've kind of always had veterans in my life one way or the other. And then I did serve in the Canadian Forces for about 3 years, probably a little bit longer than that unofficially. So I am a veteran myself. I've had a number of friends who served as well. That's kind of how I got into it. It was the guys I went to school with that sort of got me interested in the idea. Mm-hmm. But I've also had a lot of family who served in various capacities in World War II and World War I and conflicts before and after that.
Okay. Well, thank you. So what type of work do you do there? And you're in Louisiana right now, right?
I am indeed in South Louisiana, down in Bayou Country.
Right on.
This is our second home outside of when we're in Ontario on the lovely shores of Lake Erie.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and
we do. I'm sorry.
I was just going to say, I understand that you are quite a history buff, and you are doing some work down in Louisiana, helping another nation reclaim their heritage. And we were wondering if you could tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, it's kind of an interesting story. My own Indigenous background is, as you know, is mostly Lakota. Several other nations are involved in my family in one way or the other through various marriages over the years. All on my mother's side, so some of the first French that came to this continent decided they were going to marry into just about every Indigenous tribe they could find, apparently. But it's given me a lot of relatives and a lot of different cultures to sort of study up on and learn about and connect with. And down in Louisiana, we've been coming down here for many, many years. And working with various groups for various things like coastal restoration and bayou cleanup and nonprofit groups. And we've also been privileged to be involved with a number of the indigenous nations down here, the Homa, the Chitimacha, and most recently the Shanesha-Tene Apache tribe, which was kind of a new one that I wasn't even aware there were Apache people in Louisiana. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So just last year, I guess it was, we were at a small conference at an art center in the sort of middle north part of the state, and this gentleman was speaking. He was the newly elected chief of this tribe, and introducing himself and introducing the culture, and speaking about how these Apache people had come here. They're actually a branch of the Lipan Apache people who came out of Central America many millennia ago, and part of obviously the greater Apache people who have numerous tribes. They're probably closest relatives to the Lipan are the Mescalero people who are on the Texas-Louisiana border. Okay. And the Shanesha ended up in what is now Louisiana, in around the 1700s. Some of them not by choice. They were captured by the Caddo people in a number of cases and sold to the French as slaves. So they were enslaved people in Louisiana working on, as other enslaved people here were working on plantations, of course, and probably everything from building roads to farming, I suspect. But a number of them ended up settling in central Louisiana around what is now the city of Lafayette. So a couple of areas there, the Vermilion River and Prairie Marron and Bayou Tortue, the Bayou of Turtles. And they come from two other groups of people that, much like the Homa people, that came from two different tribes that were kind of smaller tribes, and they joined together for prosperity and for survival in some cases. And the same with the Shenandoah people. There were two different groups, sort of two splinter groups of Lipan Apache that formed together to form the Shenandoah. And their territory is mostly built up now. It's Lafayette is a very urban city. It's also a university city. The Louisiana State University is there. And after speaking with, listening to the chief speak at this occasion, and then speaking with him more one-on-one and finding out a bit more about this tribe, and we kind of connected and started speaking more on a personal level, and listening to his challenges in first of all proving that they exist, because they're not a federally recognized tribe, they're not a state recognized tribe. Many of the tribes in Louisiana a lot of them have state recognition. Some of them don't. Some of them have federal recognition, and some of them don't. So it's a real mix. The Homa people, for example, they're state recognized but not federally recognized, and it's that whole argument about not only who gets to be native, but who gets to decide who's native, officially, I guess. There was just a discussion online the other day with someone who was complaining that, unless you're a federally recognized tribe, then you have no right to such and such and so, and it's almost like you're not real people, and it's just, wow, that's a colonial mindset and a half.
Yes.
We've been fighting that for 1,000 years. And this is a prime example that a lot of people have never heard of the Shenandoah. A lot of people don't know that there's Apache in the middle of Louisiana, and that they've been here since the 1700s. And as a tribe, they've had a lot of the same experiences as other tribes have, especially when they've been removed from their original territories by hook or by crook, so to speak, where they're separated from some of their relatives, and they're separated from some of their culture, and they were enslaved, as numerous people were over time. Various nations have had people enslaved in various places. There's even stories of people taking people from the Diné and taking them down through the Gulf of Mexico and around up the eastern coast of the United States to work on plantations, far, far away from their nation and from their people. Yeah. And so with the Shenandoah, it's part of their challenge is saying, yes, we're still here. This is still our territory, and getting people to acknowledge that. And they've also been trying to get into to communicate with the museum and the university and their archives, and saying, we know you have, there's some things they know they have there. They've seen pictures of them in catalogs. And in some cases, they're listed as belonging to other people who it's not part of their culture. So it might be listed as Chitamacha or Caddo or Natche, and it's not their culture. And in some cases, those people have said, no, that's not ours. We don't make things like that. But it sits in an archive somewhere, and it's labeled with a number, and it's labeled with somebody donated this. It's an Indian artifact. Sometimes that's as far as it goes. And they had not a lot of luck dealing with the museum, which is literally 2 blocks from the tribal house in Lafayette. And fortunately, my partner happens to be an archaeologist and also a historian, or as she likes to say, a reformed archaeologist. She doesn't believe in digging things up and sticking them in museums. There's no reason to do that now. But finding out who those things belong to, and if they belong to an Indigenous group of people, then maybe ask them what they're about and what they are and what they're used for, and leave them in situ where you found them, or make sure that those people have access to them, that they can, if they say, yes, we'd like that back, thank you, that we can put it in the tribal house or put it in a place of reverence. Or if it's just a tool that their ancestors might have used, they might say, sure, put that in your museum, but here's what you label it as. Here's how you call it in our language.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So that people know what it is and who it belongs to.
Mm-hmm.
So that's been one of the challenges, and she sent a letter to the museum, and a museum that had been essentially ignoring them for 13 years suddenly sent an email to the chief going, who's this person and how do you know them? So we were privileged that that got a foot in the door, and we went with the chief and one of the elders and got to sit with the archivist at the museum and go through some of their artifacts and identify some of them as being Shineshe. Some of them were stone tools like arrowheads that you find in every museum, and truthfully those could have been anybody's. But the interesting thing in Louisiana is there's no rocks here. There's no stone here. So you can't make stone tools in Louisiana technically. You either have to trade for them, or like the Shineshe, in some cases, they brought stuff with them when they came here. When some of the tribe moved here willingly, as opposed to the ones that were brought here by other peoples, they would have brought tools. They would have brought some tools with them in the idea that we're moving to another place. We're going to set up like we normally do and plant some things and grow some stuff. And you would have brought some tools with you that you could carry. So, but that's interesting. It's how any kind of arrowhead or flint that's ever found in Louisiana came here from somewhere else, and some from as far away as Arkansas and Tennessee, and even some we've seen some flints down here that are as far away as the Great Lakes.
Oh wow!
Because it's stones that are particular to places like Ohio, and even some of the stone that we find in Ontario on our side of Lake Erie. We've seen stone tools made with it all the way down here. So that's and it's some of it's easily identifiable. We have stones along the side of Lake Erie that if you crack them in half, they smell like diesel fuel.
Yeah.
Made from dead animals, dead dinosaurs.
Yeah.
Jeez.
Wow.
Yeah.
So it's been an interesting adventure, and I've been working pretty closely with the chief. We've become good friends, and he's working on. He's gotten a grant for language revitalization to help the tribe put together a language lexicon, so that other tribal members can learn the language and start learning the language. He speaks some. He's able to put some phrases together and introduce himself, and some of the basic things that are the first things that you would learn. His father speaks a bit more. He's getting elderly. His grandmother was, from what I understand, was a fluent speaker of the language. So he got some from her, and obviously his father learned from her as well. But a lot of the other tribal members, it's they know the odd word here and there because that's what they've learned. Enough to say yes or thank you, or I've learned some of those myself now, so it's kind of interesting. I've always been a bit of a language nerd, and I don't speak any of my own indigenous languages other than it's like a T-shirt I used to have that said I know karate and 5 other Japanese words. Should make some of those for indigenous languages.
Yeah, right.
I know Anishinaabe and 6 other words.
Right.
But and sometimes I remember hearing an elder say that even if that's all you know, use it all the time. Use it every chance you can. He says, as long as you do that, you're keeping it alive.
Yes,
and
for sure.
That's the key is having people speak it. It's we didn't write stuff down. We spoke it. You learned by speaking to your parents, your elders. You learned the Haudenosaunee people learned the Thanksgiving prayer by hearing it every year and repeating it along with their elders. That's part of, it's such an integral part of anyone's culture is their language. All your traditions, everything in your culture is tied into your language. And I think that's why it's such an important thing for Indigenous languages especially. And that's what they're trying to do, as are some of the other tribes here. The Homa people don't really have any of their language anymore, and they speak an interesting combination of English, Louisiana, French, and the occasional Homa word thrown into a sentence somewhere. People have retained pieces of their language through their elders and their ancestors to some degree, but because they're living in a place where you're living and working with Cajun people who are speaking Cajun French and some English, and occasionally an Indigenous word from Quebec. The Cajun word for frog down here is wawaron. It's a Wendat word.
Oh.
Yeah.
So somewhere along the way, when those French explorers discovered the mouth of the Mississippi, and they had Indigenous people with them on that journey down the Mississippi, some of them must have been Wendat.
Yeah.
That's a Wendat word, and now it's a down here word. Everybody knows what a wawaron is if you use that word, but it's a what do we call that in English? An onomatopoeia, a word that sounds like the sound.
Yeah.
That's kind of what a bullfrog sounds like. Yeah.
Yeah.
I thought that was pretty funny. Like, wait, I've seen that word. That's not from here. But that's, language travels too. Your language and your culture go with you wherever you go. So wherever people are, and that's why it's important for everybody to hang on to that however you can. If it's, I speak a few words of Lakota, and I say speak, I know how to say some of these words. I know what they mean. If I have a Lakota keyboard on my computer, I can type some of them. Putting a sentence together, not so much.
Yeah.
You can say a few things that are, something like an offering to your ancestors or something. You can learn some phrases like that. Then that's something. It's something. It helps to reconnect to your culture, and I think that's a big part of for those of us that have had to reconnect. And to sort of circle back to my my time in the Canadian Forces, I when I refer to myself now, I say Indigenous veteran, but at one time those things were mutually exclusive. I became a veteran before I became Indigenous, in a sense, because all I had were a couple of family rumors, and I know that's people go, oh, everybody's got family rumors. Grandmother was a Cherokee princess. No Cherokee princesses in my family. But that was the story, as it turned out, was a line that my mother's stepsisters used to say, oh yeah, your dad used to talk about les sauvages in the family. And to be clear, her stepsisters and her mother didn't speak French. Her father didn't speak English. How that all worked out, I don't know, but it worked out. Sadly, he passed when my mom was very young, so she never really knew him. But I had always heard that phrase growing up. My mom had said it to me. My aunt said it to me. She said, "Oh yeah, your grandfather, da da da," and I'm like, "Okay, well, I sort of understand what that means, but I can't do anything about it." Well, of course, in more recent years with computers and technology and actual access to information that some people don't tend to use, I found out he wasn't just whistling Dixie. But it wasn't one of those family stories that was just a story. It was kind of astounding, the length and breadth of the Indigenous people in the family. Interestingly, they're easier to track down on this side of the border than they are on the Canada side of the border. Because on the Canada side of the border, you may get a reference or two through a church, because the priests were the only ones keeping records in Canada back in the day. The government, not so much. Occasionally a government record, depending if you had an ancestor who was officially registered on a reserve somewhere, then yeah, they might show up on a census. If they served in the military, it might show up as, they might be listed in their military records as Ojibwe or as Wendat or whatever. And in some cases, not at all. In some cases, people didn't talk about it because of the problems that causes sometimes. And things like residential schools, and you don't want your kids taken away, you just tell people you're something else. Or you just say, oh, I was just born here in Nova Scotia or Newfoundland. When my grandmother was born in Newfoundland, it wasn't even part of Canada. It was still a British colony, protectorate, or whatever it was. And my great grandmother, as far as we know, was a Mi'kmaq. But again, there's not a single record. It's like the woman didn't exist, except I have 2 pictures of her, so I have proof she existed. And she married a man who was like a 3rd-generation Newfoundlander from a family of English people, yet they lived on the west coast of Newfoundland, which is called the French coast, where everybody speaks either French or Mi'kmaq. The official languages in their little tiny town of 100 people were French and Mi'kmaq. Mm-hmm. So I always thought that was very interesting. But I started finding out all of these things, and my relative who came, who was born ostensibly in Canada-ish, would have been like Upper Canada probably at the time, but he comes from French people and Meskwaki people. The Meskwaki are what we now call the Sac and Fox down in Iowa. They were originally part of the Meskwaki were originally in Ontario, up along the bottom end of the St. Lawrence near Lake Ontario, and got pushed out by settlers and by other nations that were a little more populous, and they ended up in Michigan with the Sac, and I forget the proper name for them, but that's, again, they combined into one group, and they're now in Iowa and down that area because they got pushed out of Michigan as well. But he and his brother were born in Fort Detroit, so it wasn't the United States yet, it wasn't Michigan yet, and they both went to the Dakotas, and his brother was a little more of a city guy, I guess. He married a Lakota woman and kind of lived in a town and didn't go much beyond that. And my other relative, who's along the family line, is the one that he lived with the Lakota. He was, when they created he was at Fort Fetterman. He's actually written up a couple of history books as a trapper and a mountain man, quote unquote. He was one of the people on the Oregon Trail, so he got written up about that. He's in a couple of paintings by Frederick Remington that are hanging on my wall, who was a very famous American painter of indigenous people. He traveled a lot and sketched and took photographs, and then went back to his studio in upstate New York and made paintings and some very famous bronze sculptures. If you saw them, I've seen thousands of copies of that thing. And there's only 2 pictures, or 3. I guess there's 3 images of this particular relative. And he married his first wife was the daughter of Chief Red Cloud, and his second wife was a Northern Cheyenne woman they were somewhat related to the Lakota people as well. And I've got all kinds of relatives that came out of those marriages. I was fortunate to connect with a cousin a few years ago, and we had long talks on the phone about the territory out there. He'd been out to Pine Ridge a number of times and gone to Sundance, and he grew up in the Bronx. So but as disconnected from Lakota people as me growing up in Ontario, probably. But that's also why I find it so important that like some of the work that you're doing on the radio and the work that you're doing with your Red Road bike rides and Womb with View and just connecting people, connecting community, connecting people together, things like the friendship centers. When I discovered that I was near a friendship center when we moved to Port Colborne, I go to the Fort Erie Friendship Center and the Niagara Regional Center, And that was just such an enlightening thing, too, to be in a space that was welcoming to anybody from any background, anybody who needed to try and reconnect with culture, anybody's culture, really.
Yeah.
But enough that you could, I could sit around a drum with people who were Inuk and Mohawk and Anishinaabe, and we all sat around the same drum and shared songs and shared stories and shared language. And the Inuk elder, I'll get a lot of stories about, he was the one that was a bloody land bridge thing, because people were already here. They just moved south when the ice was coming. Because some of us moved back. Some of us stayed down there. That's why there's Dene people in the southern United States who are related to the Dene people in the Northwest Territories. They're the same people. They speak the same language. They're 1,000 miles apart.
Interesting.
So that's how those things travel.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. I think it really, all that you've said really echoes the importance of, hanging on to what you have, go searching for what you don't know as yet, right? Whether it be individually or being a part of what you were a part of and continue to be a part of down in Louisiana. And I think even too, as part of the show for Indigenous Veterans Day, I see some similarities here for sure between the Shanashepene, if I'm saying that correctly, and Pene, yeah, and
Tinne, Tinne.
Okay, and Indigenous, veterans themselves, in that they share that, lack of recognition and being left out of, events to honor all that they have contributed, right? So, thank you very much for sharing that with all of us today.
Yeah, so thank you for coming on the Red Road Journey today.
Yeah, and I love too. I just wanted to say I love that reformed archaeology. Wow, because being a student in sociology, I remember having an archaeology course, as part of my intro to Soc and whatnot, and it just didn't sit right with me what the tradition of archaeology, what they were telling us it was all about anyways. It's like, this doesn't sound right to me. We shouldn't be doing these sorts of things. So I love that you've reframed it for me, and that your partner there is doing some amazing work.
Yeah. So thank you for both of you guys for the amazing work that you guys do in the U.S. and as our sister country, Canada. Here in Canada and Ontario when you guys do come. So thank you for all the work that you guys do and everything. So Chimigwech.
Thank you for letting me speak.
Mm-hmm.
So that was Ed, our friend. He is a veteran. So I want to say thank you for listening to the Red Road Journey. We do have about a minute and a half. I was going to play another song, but we'll have to wait for that for next week. This one song that I was going to play, it just came out for just a few days before Remembrance Day, and it's a good song. We listened to it on the way here, and it's by Tom McDonald, and that's called Soldier. So if you guys want to listen to that, that's the song we're going to play for next week, one of the songs for next week. But I want to say for you guys to have an amazing week, and you guys have a safe week and weekend. All right, thank you and have a good day. Bye.
Hi, I'm Jim Dyer from Cambridge. You are listening to Community Radio CKMS, Radio Waterloo. Now live streaming on the FM band at 102.7, in addition to Rogers Digital Network at 946, and on internet. Community Radio broadcasts and promotes local news and entertainment through the spoken word and music.
You're listening to 102.7.
Hi, it's Melody Alala.